What if you could walk through London? Not the London of today, but the London of 400 years ago. What if you could smell its streets, hear its crowds, see its buildings, before the Great Fire erased almost everything and rebuilt the city from scratch? What if the London that Shakespeare walked through, that Queen Elizabeth ruled, that pirates and merchants and plague survivors and theater-goers all shared, could come back to life? This is London, 1600 AD, and it is nothing like the city you think you know. It is loud, it is filthy, it is dangerous, it is magnificent. It is the most exciting, most dynamic, most contradictory city in the world, a place where a nobleman and a pickpocket might rub shoulders in the same alleyway, where the greatest literature in the English language was being performed for audiences who had never learned to read, where fortunes were being made and lost on the same tide that carried merchant ships up the Thames. It is a city of approximately 200,000 people, the largest city in England by an enormous margin and one of the largest in Europe, and it is a city on the edge of becoming something the world has never seen before. Today, we are going to walk through it together. Every journey through London in 1600 begins the same way: the Thames. The river is not just London's lifeline, it is London's highway, London's marketplace, London's identity. Everything that makes this city great arrives and departs by water. Wool and cloth going out to Europe, spices and silk coming in from the East, wine from France, timber from Scandinavia, sugar from the Caribbean. The Thames in 1600 is one of the most spectacular sights in the world. Over 2,000 vessels of every size and description crowd its waters at any given moment, from tiny wooden wherries ferrying passengers across the current to enormous ocean-going merchant ships riding low in the water under the weight of their cargo. The river is so thick with boats that crossing from one bank to the other on foot would almost be possible by stepping from deck to deck. And at the center of it all, London Bridge, the only bridge crossing the Thames in 1600, and what a bridge it is. Nearly 300 meters long, built on 19 stone arches and lined on both sides with a continuous row of houses and shops up to 7 stories high. Over 100 buildings on a bridge. Butchers, grocers, haberdashers, pin makers, all doing business on a structure spanning one of Europe's great rivers. At the southern end of the bridge, a row of wooden poles, and on top of each pole, a human head. The heads of traitors and criminals, displayed as a warning to everyone entering the city from the south. Travelers arriving in London for the first time would crane their necks upward to count them. Sometimes there were 30 or more. Welcome to London. Step off the bridge and into the city itself, and your senses are immediately overwhelmed. The streets of London in 1600 are narrow beyond anything a modern person could imagine. The main thoroughfares are perhaps 5 meters wide. The side alleys, and London is a labyrinth of side alleys, are sometimes barely wide enough for 2 people to pass each other sideways. The upper stories of the buildings on either side lean out over the street as they rise, each floor projecting slightly further than the one below, until the buildings on opposite sides of the alley almost touch at the top. In some streets, the sky is reduced to a thin strip of gray light far above. And the noise. London in 1600 is deafeningly loud. There are no cars, no machinery, no electrical hum, but the noise of 200,000 human beings living their lives at full volume is extraordinary. Street vendors cry their wares in competing shouts, blacksmiths hammer, carpenters saw, pigs squeal in the streets. Londoners are allowed to keep pigs, and the animals wander freely through the city foraging for food. Dogs bark, church bells, and there are over 100 churches in London in 1600, ring constantly, marking the hours, celebrating weddings, mourning the dead. And the smell. The smell of London in 1600 is something no modern person has ever experienced, and most would find unbearable. There's no sewage system. Waste of every kind, human, animal, industrial, runs in open channels down the center of the streets called kennels. Tanneries process animal hides using urine and dung. Butchers throw offal directly into the street. The Thames itself, which Londoners drink from, is also where they deposit their waste. And yet, people are used to it. They live in it. They thrive in it. Who are the people of London in 1600? They are extraordinarily diverse by the standards of the time. London in 1600 is already a genuinely cosmopolitan city. There are communities of Dutch and Flemish Protestant refugees who fled religious persecution in the Spanish Netherlands, skilled craftsmen who brought new industries and techniques with them. There are Italian merchants and bankers. There are Spanish traders. There are a small but established community of Africans, free men and women, some of whom have been in London for generations, working as musicians, sailors, servants, and traders. And there are the Londoners themselves, a mix of ancient city families whose ancestors built the medieval city and a constant flood of new arrivals from every county in England, drawn to the city by the promise of work, wealth, and excitement. Because London in 1600 is a city of extraordinary social mobility. A carpenter's son can become a merchant's son can become a gentleman's son can, with the right connections and enough luck, become anything at all. But it is also a city of staggering inequality. Within a few streets of each other, you will find the magnificent townhouses of the nobility, with their private gardens, their liveried servants, their banqueting halls hung with Flemish tapestries, and the single-room tenements where entire families of 6 or 8 people sleep, eat, and work in a space barely larger than a modern bathroom. But there is one aspect of London in 1600 that sets it apart from every other city in the world: the theater. London in 1600 is in the middle of the greatest explosion of dramatic literature in the history of the English language, and at the center of that explosion, a glover's son from Stratford-upon-Avon named William Shakespeare. The Globe Theatre opened in 1699, just 1 year before our visit. It stands on the south bank of the Thames in Southwark, outside the jurisdiction of the City of London authorities who disapprove of theatrical entertainment. It is a magnificent circular wooden structure, open to the sky, capable of holding 3,000 people. 3,000 people in a single afternoon performance. The audience is as mixed as London itself. Wealthy patrons sit in the covered galleries around the edge, paying 2 or 3 pennies for a seat, but the pit, the open ground floor space in front of the stage, is packed with standing groundlings who have paid just 1 penny to be here. Apprentices, servants, fishwives, soldiers, all of them watching the same play as the lords and ladies seated above. And the plays they are watching in 1600 are extraordinary. Hamlet is being performed for the first time this very year. Julius Caesar premiered just last year. A Midnight Summer's Dream, Romeo and Juliet, The Merchant of Venice, all brand new works from a writer who is still alive, still writing, still walking these streets. Shakespeare is not yet a legend. He is a working playwright and part owner of the Globe, living in rented lodgings in Southwark, worrying about money and audiences and rival theater companies like any other working writer. He has no idea that 400 years later, the entire world will still be performing his plays. London in 1600 is also a city of extraordinary political theater. The Tower of London stands at the eastern edge of the city, a massive fortress of white stone that has served simultaneously as royal palace, prison, and execution ground for over 500 years. In 1600, it holds political prisoners in its cold, damp cells, men and women whose ambitions or beliefs have brought them into conflict with the crown. The execution block on Tower Hill has seen the deaths of queens, nobles, and commoners alike. Anne Boleyn, Thomas More, Lady Jane Grey. Their blood has soaked into the stones of this fortress. And presiding over it all, Queen Elizabeth I. 67 years old in 1600, in the final years of her extraordinary reign, the Virgin Queen, the woman who defeated the Spanish Armada, who navigated the religious turmoil of the Reformation, who turned England from a second-rate European power to a nation beginning to reach out towards global dominance. She is old now. Her famous red hair is a wig. Her teeth are black from too much sugar. Her face is painted white with a mixture that contains lead. But her mind is as sharp as it ever was, and her court, centered at the Palace of Whitehall just upriver from the city, remains the most politically charged, most intellectually vibrant, most dangerous place in England. One wrong word in the wrong ear at Whitehall can mean the Tower, or worse.
London in 1600 stands at the most extraordinary crossroads in its history. In just 66 years, in 1666, the Great Fire will erase almost everything we have walked through today. The medieval streets, the overhanging houses, the 100 churches, the markets and taverns and theaters, all of it will burn in 4 days and nights of catastrophic fire, leaving barely a stone standing across 400 acres of the city. What will rise from those ashes will be a different London, a planned London, a London of wider streets, brick buildings, Christopher Wren's magnificent churches, including the new St. Paul's Cathedral, whose dome will define the city's skyline for centuries. That London, the London most people think of when they imagine historical London, will be born from the destruction of the London we have walked through today. But before the fire, this London existed. Chaotic, stinking, magnificent, creative, cruel, and endlessly alive. The London where Shakespeare wrote his greatest plays, where Elizabeth I held her final court, where the first merchant adventurers were laying the foundations of what would become the British Empire, where 200,000 human beings were crowded together in medieval streets, living lives of astonishing richness and astonishing hardship simultaneously. This city shaped the English language. It shaped English law, English literature, English identity. And through those things, it shaped the modern world in ways we are still living with today. 400 years later, standing in the glass and steel London of the 21st century, it is almost impossible to imagine that beneath your feet, the ghost of this older, wilder, more dangerous city still exists. But it does. And now you have walked through it. If London came alive for you today, hit subscribe, because next week we go somewhere even more extraordinary.